addition to Action One Media, which, as you can see, is right behind me. Of course, you can't see our lovely producer person, so she's always behind the camera. But point is, you can catch this either, I'm presuming, at facebook.com/Action1Media. That's action and then one, ONEMEDIA. Or you're watching us at, and please follow me, at facebook.com/The Shen Show, TheShenshow. And the website for Action One Media is weareA1.com. One with the number one. All right? .com. And the YouTube link will be posted after this show. So, of course, it's linked to Facebook. So either way, it works. Okay. I figure this time, as I've made this habit now of giving a special announcement of stuff that I find especially interesting, which hopefully will be of interest to everybody else. So the idea here is we're talking about the special announcement, whatever that may be. Then the great beyond, which is astronomy and distant objects that might be interesting, or the fundamentals of physics itself. Who knows? And then of course the space cowboys. You can't forget them. Humans out there in space doing all sorts of craziness. And then lastly will be some astrobiology, or really I just want to talk about aliens. Weird stuff. Which is what it is. Whoa, I sound loud. Wow. All right. So first thing, I want to talk about this thing called the Gateway Foundation, right? So Gateway Foundation apparently has plans for a rotating space station. So some of you guys and gals may have heard of the fact that the International Space Station is going to be replaced sometime in the future with something called the Lunar Orbital Platform Gateway, which is basically the fancy word for a space station that's revolving around the moon versus revolving around the Earth. Some of you may have also heard of other commercial space station companies, like ones that I may have mentioned, such as Bigelow, or here in Houston, Axiom, and Orion Span, also in Houston, and possibly a few other ones that I have not remembered or done enough research in. But all of those space stations, though, are not rotating. In other words, you're still going to be weightless, right? So the thing with rotating space stations, the ones that you find in sci-fi movies, like unless it's Star Trek or something like that, or Star Wars, where they figured out how to create artificial gravity. The typical way of doing it with our current knowledge is basically spinning an object. Why does that work? Well, have you ever been in a merry-go-round and you spin around and you feel like this force pushing against you, so to speak, or pulling you? Well, it's a similar idea. Now imagine this on a much larger scale. So essentially, you can create this fake force which simulates gravity. Okay, so the Gateway Foundation is basically a group of folks who have decided to get together to design a rotating space station around Earth. Okay, so where's it going to be? Well, it's going to be a circular orbit of about 400 kilometers. It's going to be pressurized, same atmosphere as Earth, and it's going to be pretty huge, but not tremendously huge. It's going to have a width of 488 meters, so that's kind of its diameter, since this would be a circular hub thing, and have this depth of 76 meters. That's how high it is, right? So imagine like a flat disc, sort of, 76 meters. And how many people can fit inside? Apparently, a huge number, 1,250 guests with 150 crew. And it's all going to be powered by solar, which will require 56.1 megawatts. Okay, put it another way, I think it's like 40 times. No, maybe not quite 40 times. It is actually, in the future, it will be huge, but it's right. This current design, I believe, is about 3 times the size of the current space station. All right. So this concept is called the Gateway, which is a rotating space station, and It's so essentially, like I said, it's pretty much the only design out there where they're trying to do a rotating space station, right? Now, why is that important? I mean, come on, it's pretty cool seeing people just floating around, right? I mean, you've seen those videos. Well, it's because space microgravity is actually very detrimental to health. So this can be extensively seen. You can watch NASA's recent twin study, which was basically two astronauts, Mark Kelly and Scott Kelly. They're twin astronauts, right? One of them was sent into space, and the other one was left on Earth. And since they're identical, they wanted to examine what what weightlessness effect has it, like what it has. Well, guess what happened? Um, so Scott Kelly, um, besides the same, loss of muscle mass and bone density, which we have known for a while, we've also seen that his eyesight diminished. He experienced intense swelling in his extremities and changes in his organ function and even gene expression. So that is, that's definitely something of note. And maybe there's even other effects, right? So, and also of note is that nobody knows what happens in between gravities. In other words, what about on Earth? I mean, not on Earth, sorry, on the moon, when it's 1/6 that of Earth. Or on Mars, where it's 38% of Earth, right? So all these things are quite unknown. And so it's important also that this lunar gateway, not lunar gateway, I don't know why I keep saying that. This gateway, it's not called lunar gateway. This gateway has two different rings. So there's an outer ring known as a Mars gravity area, where essentially you experience a faster rotation rate. It's further away from the core, right? So you have an artificial gravitational force that's similar to what would be experienced on the surface of Mars. So that way you can actually do experiments instead of sending people all the way to Mars and then finding out, oh my gosh, now all your body's completely messed up. We can do this test on the space station, and if there's some issues, you can just go back to the Earth gravity, right? So I mean it's fairly ambitious, but it could be done. So this foundation is hoping to leverage partnerships with certain space agencies and to do this. So we got to take a short break. When we come back, let's watch a little short video, them describing what they're doing with some cool little animation, which is better than what I can describe with words. And then we will go on. So, short pause here. We'll be back. This is episode 22 so far.
One inspiring action.
So I challenge you today to start strong.
Start the revolution. When we turn up, we shut it down. We are skywalkers. The spheres of my Kabbalah illuminated properly in sight. Shows the man in universe and the creator's gift of life. When the earth collides with every piece of star from afar, there's a higher probability of... Cause I'm calling for you. Can you feel that? See, I'm calling for you. Can you feel that? Yeah. See, I'm calling for you. Say how you really feel. Say how you really feel. Yeah. Baby, just keep it real. Baby, just keep it real.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl Janetta, and I am still live at the Indie Fest. This is A1 Live Pop-Up, and I am here with the organizer of this amazing event. This is Mr. Jano, the Sun King. And Jano, I know you're more than just...
Put your money where your community is. Get in the action at weareA1.com.
right, guys. So, you're listening to episode 22 of SG2 on Space. This is your host, Shenga, and this is the only weekly space radio show here in Houston, Texas. And of course, you can hear us anywhere through the wonderful world of the internet. Of course, that would be at facebook.com/action1media or facebook.com/The Shen Show. And soon we'll be posting on YouTube as well. So, with that, right before we went on break, we were talking about the foundation, the new foundation called Gateway Foundation, which has formulated a plan to design the first ever rotating space station. And they're trying to do this for real instead of just speculating at like a student design competition. They're actually trying to form partnerships with space agencies of the world like NASA, Roscosmos, that's a Russian one, ESA, that's a European one, China, India, and others, as well as commercial aerospace companies. They're also planning to raise money through early ticket sales and selling modules for the super rich and holding a lottery and creating a crew membership program, which is for everybody else. So with that, let's take a quick look at a little video they generated describing exactly what they have in mind in graphical form.
You've invested in a car full of safety features. They help prevent accidents.
The Gateway Foundation was formed to build the first spaceport. In order to do that, we must first build a few smaller structures first. One of the most important is the Von Braun Rotating Space Station. This will likely be the first commercial space construction project in history. My name is John Blinko, and I'm president of the Gateway Foundation. Any station design that is not a corporate rotation is almost a waste of time. For short periods of time, a zero-G platform can make sense, but if you have workers there for more than 2 or 3 months, then forget it. Why? You'll understand after I read to you a first-hand account by astronaut Scott Kelly after he returned from 340 days at the International Space Station. Every part of my body hurts. All of my joints and all of my muscles are protesting the crushing pressure of gravity. I'm also nauseated, although I haven't thrown up. A crack of light wakes me. Is it morning? No, it's just Amiko coming to bed. I've only slept a couple of hours, but I feel delirious. It's a struggle to come to consciousness, enough to even move to tell her how awful I feel. I'm seriously nauseated now, feverish. My pain has gotten worse. This isn't how I felt after my last mission. This is much, much worse. I struggle to get up, find the edge of the bed. Feet down, sit up, stand up. At every stage, I feel like I'm fighting through quicksand. When I'm finally vertical, the pain in my legs is awful. And on top of that pain, I feel a sensation that's even more alarming. It feels as though all the blood in my body is rushing to my legs, like the sensation of blood rushing to your head when you do a handstand, but in reverse. I can feel the tissue in my legs swelling. I shuffle my way to the bathroom. I make it to the bathroom, flip on the light, and look down at my legs. They are swollen and alien stumps, not legs at all. I say, Amiko, come look at this. She kneels down and squeezes one ankle. It squishes like a water balloon. She looks up at me with worried eyes. I can't even feel your ankle bones, she says. My skin is burning too, I tell her. Amiko frantically examines me. I have a strange rash all over my back, the backs of my legs, the back of my head and neck, everywhere I was in contact with the bed. I wonder whether my friend Misha back in Moscow is suffering from the same swollen legs and painful rashes. I suspect so. Our space agencies won't be able to push out further into space to a destination like Mars until we can learn more about how to strengthen the weakest links in the chain that makes spaceflight possible, the human body and mind. This is a nightmare. It sounds like a science fiction horror movie. This is what 340 days in zero-G space.
All right, so you can see that is definitely a horror movie, right? As a wonderful CEO of Gateway expressed, it is Mr. Blinko, Blincow. Or so point is, yeah, you really don't want to experience space in some ways. Now that gives me a pause on whether I actually want to be in outer space for a long duration. So maybe for the everyday person, not the super rich, who's probably some of them going to do it anyway, but for the everyday person, maybe wait until we have a spinning space station, which is what the Gateway, this foundation is going to do, right? So with that, yeah, so you can check out their website to find out more information, gatewayspaceport.com. What a wonderful URL. I guess they grabbed a good one. So, all right. So, moving on here, because we can't talk about one topic the whole time. Let us move on and talk about Earth atmosphere. So, quick guess for you guys. Where does the Earth atmosphere end? All right. So, does it end? Well, you know what? If I give you like miles, you probably wouldn't know. So, do you think the space station is in the Earth atmosphere, our current one? Do you think the moon is? Well, recent discoveries of old data from the Apollo days, actually, amazingly enough, that combined with modern data has yielded new results, which shows that Earth's atmosphere stretches out to the moon and beyond. That's right. So you might think the moon has no atmosphere, and you're absolutely right. The moon has no atmosphere. Well, actually, it has a very thin atmosphere, but let's not go into that. All right. But the crazy thing is that the Earth atmosphere actually stretches out to the moon and beyond. So if you're on the moon, the Apollo astronauts were actually still in Earth atmosphere. All right. So why do we say this? Well, it turns out that the gaseous layer that wraps around Earth reaches up to 630,000 kilometers away, or basically 50 times the diameter of our planet. All right. This is according to some new studies by observations by the ESA/NASA Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, also called SOHO. So essentially, they looked over observations of made 2 decades ago by the SOHO spacecraft. So let me explain this a little bit. So when our atmosphere merges into what is commonly known as outer space, there's a cloud of hydrogen atoms, called the geocorona. So one of the spacecraft instruments on the SOHO, called SWAN, used its very sensitive sensors to trace the hydrogen signature and precisely determine the outskirts of the geocorona. And note that this could only be done at certain times of the year when Earth and its geocorona comes into view. So what did they discover? Well, it turns out that the first telescope on the moon, placed by Apollo 16 astronauts in 1972, captured an image of the geocorona surrounding Earth and glowing brightly in ultraviolet light. At that time, however, those astronauts did not know they were actually embedded in the outskirts of the geocorona themselves. So, where does this thing come from? Well, the sunlight interacts with hydrogen atoms through a particular wavelength of ultraviolet light. Remember, the sun produces light in all these different wavelengths. So in particular wavelength light of ultraviolet light, called Lyman alpha, which the atoms can both absorb and emit, this type of light is absorbed by the Earth atmosphere. Okay, so the SWAN instrument could selectively measure the Lyman alpha light from the geocorona and discard like hydrogen atoms that's further out in interplanetary space. So, what we figured out was that, there is this remnant, there is not a significant amount, but like say 70 atoms per cubic centimeter at 60,000 kilometers above Earth's surface. And if you go even further out, it's not just 70 atoms, it's 0.2 atoms per cubic centimeters. That means you would need what, like 10 cubic centimeters to have possibility of one atom? Okay, so it's barely anything, all right? But it's still there. Now, does this affect, say, us hopping around the moon? Nope, no, it didn't. Clearly not, because astronauts didn't really experience anything. However, it could interfere with future astronomical observations performed in the vicinity of the moon. So, just note here, I mean, this is kind of interesting. So, in other words, it doesn't really affect your daily life. Say, eventually when we, go around the moon, human presence on the moon, but it definitely does affect some science done, right? Since you do have an atmosphere, very slightly. So, neat stuff, all right? Now, going beyond Earth, here's another thing I thought was really cool is the Japanese spacecraft. Japanese spacecraft has been hurtling towards a distant asteroid for quite some time now. The spacecraft is called Hayabusa 2, which I do not know Japanese. Otherwise, I would say it in Japanese. But anyways, so this spacecraft has been approaching this asteroid called Ryugu. Ryugu is named after an undersea palace in a Japanese fairy tale. Now, of course, in this, there's no palace. It's just a giant rock. It's about 900 meters, in other words, 3,000 feet in diameter, and about 280 million kilometers, or in other words, 170 million miles away from Earth, all right? And if you go onto the wonderful Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA site, they have some neat pictures of Ryugu taken since October last year, when the Japanese spacecraft was, close enough to take some pictures. Now, of course, interesting thing here is that we don't just want to look at pretty pictures. We want to actually land on this, which is crazy. Not only land on it, but collect samples and bring it back to Earth, all right? So, this is extremely difficult because you have to aim, Hayabusa 2, this little spacecraft, has to aim for a 20-foot diameter circle to avoid obstacles, all right? And so space agency controllers all the way from here, from Earth, will direct its approach until it's about 1,600 feet or 500 meters above the asteroid surface. And then it's going to have to be smart enough with its own internal software to direct itself to land on the surface. Why? Because it's so far away, it takes 20 minutes for commands to go from the Earth to reach the spacecraft, right? And that takes way, you can't really control real time when it's, So yeah, that is going to be quite the thing. And what is it going to happen? Well, this Hayabusa 2 will extend a pipe and shoot a pinball-like bullet into the asteroid, and it's going to blow up material from beneath the surface. And that material is going to, get blown up, and then the craft will collect the samples, which will then be eventually spacecraft will return back to Earth. Okay, so why the heck are we interested in this thing called Ryugu to start with? Well, it is what's known as a near-Earth object. Near-Earth objects are basically small solar system objects whose orbit brings it close to Earth, right? So, by convention, a near-Earth object is any small object where its orbit can be less than 1.3 astronomical units. In other words, 1.3 times the orbit of Earth, right? So, of course, that doesn't mean it's 1 point. Yeah. Some of them can actually intersect Earth, and those we give it a different name, which is potentially hazardous objects. So we've got near-Earth objects, and then a subgroup of that are potentially hazardous objects, which are asteroids or comets with an orbit that can potentially collide Earth, which would be really bad. All right? So, not all near-Earth objects have a chance of hitting Earth, but potentially hazardous objects do, and Ryugu happens to be one of those. And it's pretty large. It measures 1 kilometer, which is over half a mile in diameter. Okay. It also has a pretty rare spectral type of CG. So it has qualities of both a C-type asteroid, which C-type asteroids are pretty common. All right. So that basically has a large amount of carbon in addition to rocks and minerals. Probably the C comes from the fact it's carbonaceous, right? It's mostly carbon. So it has qualities of both a C-type asteroid and a G-type asteroid. So G-type asteroids are pretty uncommon type of carbonation asteroids, only 5% of asteroids, all right? So, for instance, one of the largest asteroids, though, called Sirius, that's between Earth and Mars, that is a G-type asteroid. So this asteroid has a combination of both, which is pretty cool. So, in other words, this asteroid was targeted because it's easy to reach, can potentially hit Earth, and it has interesting scientific characteristics, and it turns out it could be worth a lot of money. So in May 2018, according to AstroRank website, which is a beautiful website, you guys should definitely check it out if you get the chance. AstroRank.com, ASTERANK.com, which essentially lists out all the different asteroids with their monetary value. So according to AstroRank website, the current value of Ryugu for mining purposes is speculated to be $82.76 billion. I think the Japanese Space Agency should just go there and grab the whole asteroid and bring it back. But unfortunately, I don't think they have the technology to do so. So, oh well, they're just going to bring back a tiny little speck. All right, so in any case, very interesting, and hopefully great discoveries are made, and hopefully more when they come back with an actual sample, right? So that'd be cool. All right, so I could go into more details about asteroids because that's one of my that's actually one of my interests, and I've done that for many years in the past. But let's move on because time is rushing by here. All right, so here's something else that's interesting. Did you realize that Earth, that's right, so Earth, we have life, right? So now we all know Earth has life due to the sun, but it turns out that Earth, the reason it could have life could have been due to not just our sun, but another star as well. So there's this recent computer simulation that was done, and it showed that Earth's solid surface and moderate climate could be due to a massive star in the birth environment of the sun. So without that star's radioactive elements injected into our early solar system, our home planet, what we call Earth, could be a very hostile ocean world covering global ice sheets, which would suck because then we would not exist. Right? So, what the heck does that mean? Well, so these simulations show that radioactive elements can help it make a wet system drier, and have a possible explanation as to why planets within the system would share similar properties. But, you know, this radio... So... Let me explain, right? So researchers say, like, okay, water covers more than 2/3 of the surface of the Earth, right? Which seems like a lot. And okay, so let me describe a little more. All planets have a core, well, have a mantle, which is the inside layer, and then the crust. So if the water content of a rocky planet is significantly greater than that of Earth, the mantle is covered by deep global ocean and an impenetrable layer of ice on the ocean floor. So this would have prevented geochemical processes such as a carbon cycle on Earth that stabilized the climate and created, you know, surface conditions which enabled life, right? Conducive to life. So remember a little while back I was talking about exoplanet that was like pretty much all water? Yeah, that would be pretty unlikely to have life. At least life as, you know, as we know it due to Earth conditions. All right. So what they did was, so basically what they're presuming is that when our proto-sun formed, a supernova occurred in cosmic neighborhood. Supernova is one of the largest explosions in the universe. I can't say in the world because obviously it's beyond Earth. So it's the final death throes of a star. And you can kind of think of it, it's pretty much exploding. So our sun's never going to do it because it's not large enough. But some other larger stars like Sirius could do it. Anyways, point is, a supernova occurred in our cosmic neighborhood, and radioactive elements such as aluminum-26 were fused in this dying-massive star and got injected into our young solar system, which could have been from stellar winds or supernova ejecta after the explosion. All right. So, and then this enabled us to, have these radioactive elements, which, like I said earlier, caused our planet to be drier than it could have been otherwise. So, this is very intriguing, not just for finding the fact of, oh my gosh, we were born thanks to some supernova in our neighborhood, but also the fact that it could help with figuring out where to point our space telescopes in finding exosolar planets that could possibly have Earth-like environments, right? So, we shall see what will happen here. This would be quite interesting, especially if we see this as proof, right? This is just, we only have like one data point, which is Earth. Imagine if we find that for other planets as well, that's like Earth-like environment, and due to the fact that, we realize there's been a supernova that happened during that formation, that would show something, which is interesting. Death could create life. Isn't that poetic? Anyways, I thought that was cool. So with that, so massive star exploding enabled life on Earth, right? So what else is exploding? Well, lots of other things apparently. Thanks to our wonderful telescopes named, especially in this case, named James Clerk Maxwell Telescope. It has recently discovered flares that's 10 billion times more powerful than that of the sun, which is ridiculous. So they discovered this in. By the way, James Clerk Maxwell Telescope is not a space telescope. It's on the mountaintops of Hawaii, right, where on top of I would hope, dormant volcano. So these astronomers, especially the lead investigator, Dr. Steve Mayers, study the birth of nearby stars because they wanted to understand, once again, you can look at, this time we can actually look at other stars to figure out the history for our own solar system. So what they did is that they recorded a 1,500-year-old flare using this telescope state-of-the-art high-frequency radio technology and really sophisticated image analysis techniques. So, and what they found was, so first of all, let me explain what a stellar flare is. So, stellar flare, as the name is, okay, so you guys know what a flare is. You carry out a flare, right? So, essentially, a stellar flare is a sudden flash of increased brightness. Typically, it's close to a sunspot group, and it's often, but not always, accompanied by what's known as a coronal mass ejection. All right, so for our sun, we call them solar flares, right? But if it's something else, we call it stellar flares. So they also emit a lot of radio waves. All right. And if the ejection is towards Earth, for our sun, for instance, they can penetrate into our upper atmosphere. All right. So essentially, it's like the sun giving a gigantic burp, okay? Except instead of burping gas, well, actually, it is burping gas, but you know what I mean. It's hot gas with a lot of light. All right. So plasma and particles and all that jazz. So imagine that, something 10 billion times brighter than our sun. So hopefully, and that's for a new star, so hopefully that gives us some insight onto how our sun was when it was younger, which apparently is a lot more violent if we base it off of this data. So so that'd be interesting. And by the way, solar flares are not necessarily a good thing. They really influence local space weather, and space weather, since we depend so much on electronics, if you have gigantic solar flares, it can create, pretty much it can disable satellites and knock down terrestrial electric power grids. In fact, their studies have shown that they've shown some threshold where it would pretty much knock out much of the power here on Earth, which is terrible. So there's websites where you can actually track, the solar weather or space weather. So, it's the sun provides us life, and it could really destroy us. So you don't know when that's going to happen, really, for the next solar flare. But point is, Elise is not doing stuff that's like 10,000 times, 10 billion times, my bad, more powerful than the sun. There's a good reason why there was no life in like the first billion years of the sun's existence. Yeah. So. So. I think what's going to happen now is that we're going to take. Actually, you know what? Let me talk about this weird thing called Space Harpoon real quick. I'll start talking about it, then we can take a short break, and then we'll watch this little cool video about it. So, we're talking about space cowboys, right? What do cowboys do besides ride horses? Well, how about, catch a cow or some other animal? Well, it turns out the British is doing that with not a horse / lasso, but with a harpoon, a space harpoon specifically. So this was actually released last summer, and it's known as a removed debris spacecraft released from the International Space Station. So it was developed by the small satellite company called Surrey Satellite Technology, which has been around forever building satellites. So the purpose of the satellite is to test whether satellites can shoot out a harpoon with a debris net, and is to combat space debris. So there's a gazillion things going around to Earth, which is junk left by us, which is quite dangerous. It's going to hit spacecrafts or humans in the future, or spacecrafts that have humans, space stations. So there's various ways of cleaning this up, and this is one of the cool ones. So recently, a week ago, it tested out its harpoon, which is pretty cool. So the satellite successfully tested its harpoon system and basically verified that it could secure space debris and keep it from flying away. So what happened? Well, the satellite's harpoon struck a target plate that was mounted in a boom about 5 feet away. And the harpoon was launched at about 72 kilometers per hour, in other words, 45 miles per hour, and speared the target. So we're going to take a short little break, and when we come back, you'll see a cool little video of this thing, like, pretty much hitting this object with a harpoon, space harpoon, which is pretty darn cool.
There's a formula. If you follow the formula, you will be successful. Facts. You will make it. There's no way that you won't. So I was like, I'm going to listen to all the advice that I can, figure out what this formula is, and then follow it. Now I'm interested in learning how to code, and I'm realizing that program that she did is probably similar to what I would need. So the plan was to spend a few months saving and studying, 3 months of school, 3 months of job hunting, and all of that together put me at a year. Hearing the stories of people who've done exactly what I'm trying to do was very reinforcing. It's not trying to make it to the NBA.
Action 1. Independent thinkers working together, inspiring action in media. Get in the action.
For all media companies, for podcasts and indie stations, for artists, for young professionals, for science and technology, for all media companies.
Join today. Get in the action at weareA1.com. Put your money where your community is. Get in the action at weareA1.com.
All right, and we're back. You've been listening to SG2 on Space, episode number 22. And the only weekly space radio show here in Houston, Texas, hearable around the world, and viewable too. Facebook.com/ActionOneMedia, Facebook.com/The Shen Show, spelled TH, not TH. Yeah, well, THESHENSHOW, and hearable without video at actually, you know what? Never mind. weareA1.com. Alright, so before we went on break, we were talking about the British testing the Space Harpoon, which was launched last year from the space station, called a Remove Debris spacecraft that was testing a technology to launch a harpoon at a flat plate and see if you can basically, see if it works. And the idea is to prove that it could be used as an active debris removal thing, because there are billions of tons, or there's billions of junk floating around space, and that's not good, because if it collides with someone, look at the movie Gravity, except not to that level. All right, people can die, and satellites could be knocked out. So let's watch a little short video. This is an actual video of its deployment. Hey, so apparently that was not a real video, but trust me, the real experiment was done. I suppose that video just didn't show it, but it's still cool, right? It showed their whole thing, all the stuff they did, including the deorbiting part, which is awesome. That's a really neat way of deorbiting. Kind of like a parachute, really, for a fairly small satellite. So, with that, and you saw Airbus name over there as well, because guess what? They played a role. In fact, the Harpoon was developed by Airbus, and so I suppose I thought most people knew that Airbus also does space, but apparently not. Everyone knows that Airbus does airplanes, I would hope. Anyways, I could go and talk about how it's like one of the largest defense/space companies in the world, but hey. In fact, it's the world's second largest space company after Boeing, and it's in the top 10 defense companies in the world. So, yeah, anyhow, definitely a competitor to Boeing, all right? And anyways, I mean, built a whole bunch of spacecrafts, built like Ariane 5, Ariane 4, all these rockets, which is used pretty much everywhere. Built the Columbus International Space Station module, the module for the European Space Agency, basically. Building the Orion service module, has built the Gaia spacecraft, okay, you know what? Let me not go on. But point is, they built a whole bunch of stuff. All right, and so this is a very tiny part for them, but it's still cool. And Surrey obviously built the satellite, which is cool. So, all right. On from satellites around Earth to the moon. So, keep talking about the Chinese, right? The Chang'e 4 lander, early January, 2019, and the Yutu-2 rover. So, that's awesome. But what about everybody else? Well, it turns out that everybody's trying to get to the moon. So, on Thursday night, which actually means tonight. All right, assuming tonight for you is February 21st, a SpaceX Falcon 9 will lift off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. And although its primary payload is Nusantara Satu, which is in Indonesian, I cannot say that at all, communication satellite. What I find more interesting is the secondary payload called Bereshit, which that's probably Hebrew, and I cannot pronounce Hebrew. Beresheet, which is a lunar lander built for Space IL, which was a former Google Lunar X Prize team that has decided, although nobody won a Google Lunar X Prize, we're going to go ahead and go to the moon anyway. So the Falcon 9 will place the Bereshit into an elliptical transfer orbit. It will then gradually extend the apogee of that orbit until it's captured by lunar gravity, and then it's going to attempt a landing, currently scheduled for April 11th this year. So basically, all right, so quoting Morris Kahn, the president of SpaceIL, in a statement on Monday, Monday meaning February 18th, he said, "We are making history and are proud to be part of a group that dreamed and realized the vision that many countries in the world share, but so far only 3 have realized. If successful, Israel, trust me, this is pretty amazing, would be the 4th country after the former Soviet Union, the United States, and China to land a spacecraft on the moon. It would also be the first privately funded spacecraft to land on the moon." Where did they get all this money? Primarily from philanthropic donations. Yes, a lot of people are kind enough to donate to a space company. Imagine that. So, assuming they succeed, India is in line to be the 5th. So, the Chandrayaan-2 mission was delayed a bunch of times, but it's finally going to launch sometime this spring with both an orbiter and a lander, and the latter is also going to carry a rover. So, and then furthermore, China is set to return to the moon later this year with Chang'e 5, which is going to be its first sample return mission, which is going to be the first ever sample return mission for any country since the mid-1970s, which is pretty awesome. And then, of course, NASA has not been slacking off. It has awarded contracts, or it is going, well, it has announced contracts. I don't know if the money has been completely given out yet, for its commercial lunar payload services program, which will pay companies for delivery of technology demonstration science instruments to the lunar surface. So, and proposals is going to be due to NASA March 25th. And the agency is going to give out awards in May 2019. And they're going to contract for 6-month studies. Bridenstine, our NASA administrator, says, that's really fast for this kind of program. He also threw out this thing, like people ask him, what about competition with China? And he says, I get this question a lot about what's driving us to the moon so far, and are we worried about other countries and their abilities to get to the moon? Somebody lands on the far side of the moon, and NASA lands on the far side of Mars. We put humans on the moon in 1969, so I think that race is over. All right, so Mr. Bridenstine could definitely say that, but at the same time, you got to remember, it's not just going to the moon, walking around with footsteps. It's building actual settlement there, right? So, and there's a whole bunch of countries going at it. So I wouldn't say it's a competition in the put your footprint and flag on the ground. It's more competition in the sense that I'm going to put my footprint on the ground and stay on the ground there and build a settlement. More footprints are going to come. So that hasn't happened during our first humanoid exploration of the moon. So this time, I think it is going to be definitely on a permanent basis. All right. So with that aside, we got to rush here and talk about interesting alien stuff. Briefly, bacteria in zombie mode. That's right. This got me excited because apparently bacteria, not only is there obviously a live stage and a dormant phase, there's apparently a third state, which I would call zombie mode, but apparently scientists don't really call it zombie mode. They call it something else that's fancy, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. In any case, point is, they did this experiment where they worked with this particular bacteria called Bacillus subtilis. It's a non-pathogenic bacterium that occurs in the soil. All right, so they basically, the bacteria requires this thing called endospores to go into dormant mode, and they chose a variant of this bacteria that did not have that, so they could not go into dormancy mode, and then they just starved the bacteria and observed what happened. So it had no nutrients and was still able to survive. So they weren't really active, nor were they asleep. It's just all types of activity slowed down to extremely low level. So the starved bacteria shrank until they were almost spherical, so they're normally rod-shaped. The processes that normally were active were altered, but they didn't stop. So, and the bacteria even continued to divide, only not once every 40 minutes, but once every 4 days. So much slower, right? So this, oh, by the way, the term, yes, know what it's called now. It's called nutrient poor growth. So the question is, do other bacteria know this trick? And you know what? It's cool. Imagine if we had life on Mars like several billion years ago. It could still be there, just like dividing really slowly if it's bacteria, right? Which is crazy. I mean, that's pretty awesome, I thought anyway. Okay, so bacteria, life, okay, wonderful. But you know what? Come on. There's more to life than bacteria. So you got to talk about actual intelligent aliens like UFOs, because that's really the whole point of this show. Yes, the whole point of this show is to talk about all the science stuff to get to UFOs and traveling to other worlds, because that's actually what's happening, and that's real, and that's really interesting. Anyways, regardless of your viewpoint, there's no doubt there's strange things going on in the sky. All around the world, in fact. So, Australian sightings, for instance. Just this week, 2 stargazers claim to have witnessed, of course, according to their news reports, they say X-Files style type sighting, right? So they're from the Gold Coast of Australia. They didn't know each other, so couldn't possibly be making things up. So northern New South Wales, right? So David Walsh, he's fishing at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, because that's what people in Australia like to do, I guess, or this particular guy. So he claims to have seen something flickering and reappearing. So he filmed the illuminated object in the distance, decided it couldn't be a plane. Ken Duke, age 72, claims he's witnessed at least one UFO a month in Tweed Hills for the last 54 years. And he says, I was taking my dog out for a pee, and I saw the same thing. I came inside, looked out my window to the east, and I saw the mothership. There were two that night. One was a mothership. Clearly a UFO believer, or alien believer, since you're going to call it mothership. All right, pretty crazy, right? Then, North Wales. So in the UK here, there's an eerie footage of an unexplained bright blue light that appeared in the sky. Dark sky suddenly shone with a distant light that glowed across both lanes of a road. Footage was captured on the road A55 in northern Wales by a member of the National Police Air Service. I'll share the link and you guys decide what you think it might be. Lastly, more detailed news report from Oregon. And it's cool because this guy is actually reported to the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, which is one of the largest UFO organizations here in America. So Jim Friedman, he saw strange lights outside his Bend, which is a tiny town in Oregon, home, and he caught it on video. So anyways, he's a self-admitted fan of the unknown, and he has been, admittedly, he tells the reporter, a guy that looks and never finds UFOs. That sounds like me until the day that I do. Anyways, so it was hovering just over 500 feet above the ground on this meadow. And so, 2 days after that, a friend of his saw something pretty similar flying above the Cascades. Cody Alexander, he said, I had my motorhome parked up here and stepped outside. I saw this bright light. I mean, it was a brilliant bright light that was in the sky. And Alexander called his friend Freeman, compared their videos. And apparently, guess what? It was pretty similar. So Alexander captured two red dots that were coming in and out of the picture alongside a bright white light. He said it stayed for more than 2 minutes and then went out totally. So he thinks the light was somewhere above the Mount Bachelor and has some kind of tower-like structure on top of it. So, I mean, both these guys, they're definitely believers in aliens. Either Alexander, quoting Alexander here, either you can believe it or discount it, but I know what I saw. I know there's some, and Friedman says, I know there's something out there. I just don't know what it is exactly. Alexander says, we're not alone. And guess what? What do I think? We're definitely not alone. I mean, come on, really, guys? So, come on, really, guys, meaning I can't believe there's people who thinks we are alone, all right? Not that I'm doubting these folks. Now, remember that a couple of episodes ago where I was talking about Bigfoot and UFOs? I don't know about that part, but this, yeah, there's no denying there's something weird going on in the skies, right? So, and, by the way, the MUFON, if you ever want to check it out, is MUFON.com, MUFON.com, and they're a US-based nonprofit organization, basically civilian volunteers to study alleged UFO sightings. So if you see one, you should report it, because, what better way to have people, verify and know what's going on, right? So, so please do that. And if you're abducted, definitely report it, all right? Love abductions. I mean, not that you want to be abducted by aliens, but hey, if you experience that, please report it here. And if you have crop circles or orbs of life or whatever, all right? Anyways, that aside, so we got to wrap this up. Unfortunately, for better or worse, I'm a little tired of talking myself, so probably for better. So you have been listening to SG2 on Space, episode number 22. And of course, check us out at facebook.com/The Shen Show, TheShenshow. And my name is Shen Ge, Shen, last name Ge. And feel free to support me at patreon.com/SG2, patreon.com/SG2. And also, YouTube link will be shared shortly as well. And of course, this is supported by, or rather on the platform, Action One Media, facebook.com/Action1 Media, and weareA1.com, WEAREA1.com. So until next week, I will catch you guys later, and take care. And don't forget, look up, because you never know what you will see. It's not just a moon up there. Believe me, you will know if you're abducted. Even if you're not abducted, you will know. All right.
Peace, it's Brother Atum Ra, and you tuned in to Action One Network.